Mr. Chairman, you're live on YouTube. Senator Anderson. Senator Garou. Senator Nethercott. Senator Salazar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Here. First matter for our consideration is HB 181. This is a bill that we worked extensively over the interim. And I'll open it up for agency comment. Anybody online? Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone online for 181?
David Carpenter and Charles Moore have raised their hand.
Okay, put Charlie in. Go ahead and put the other fellow in too.
Okay. This is Jim Wilcox.
Is Charlie Moore there?
I'm sorry, it's David Carpenter.
Mr. Carpenter, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Charlie should be, he was just down in our conference room. He should be jumping on here.
Are you with the agency?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. We appreciate you allowing us to join via Zoom today. And in reviewing the bill as it stands now, the agency has no issues or concerns. Is there any questions from the committee?
Committee, any questions for the agency? Looks like we've worked it so exhaustively that there's none, Charlie.
Well, sounds like we're doing okay then. Thank you.
All right. Comments from the public? Anybody online from the public for this bill?
No one has raised their hand.
Okay. I'll close comment. It's to the committee. Moved and seconded. Discussion or amendments? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salazar. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. That goes down to the floor. And Mike, I think this is yours on the floor, right? Sure. Okay, we lost our chairman of corporations, so we'll just stand at ease until he gets back for the presentation on HB 3. Chairman Case, welcome. We are on a joint corporations bill, House Bill 3, and the floor is yours. We are the original committee on this bill. It's not a re-referral.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm here to speak against House Bill 3. House Bill 3 is would take and make independent power producers state assessed property. And I think that's a bad idea for policy reasons. It's a bad idea for some of the reasons we just discussed this morning about the difference between state assessed property and locally assessed property. And if I may, Mr. President or Mr. Chairman, so electric utility is valued by the state on a unitary tax basis. Basically, we know the total value of the utility. The numbers are well known. They file reports with the Public Service Commission and also with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So it's very easy to ascertain the investment that's on the books for public utilities. It's also true that they earn a return on the investment that they employ for public service, and that has to be accounted for very precisely. Independent power facilities, although they interconnect with utilities, they're not electric companies. They don't have books the same way. They're just like other industrial assets, like a refinery, like the equipment in a mine mouth, like oil and gas, locally assessed equipment. And these are things that local assessors, they have people that go in the field and do this stuff all the time. And they value it looking at the actual equipment. We talked about the schedules and things this morning. But I think local assessors, and they're unanimous in their position that these independent power producing facilities should be locally assessed. They'll testify to that, and they're unanimous. Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman, the last time a independent power producer facility was appealed, it goes back to a Duke Power case, and it's more than a decade old. And the matters in that appeal were trivial. And so I'm arguing that we're not getting the tax revenues we should be getting from these facilities. And it's over and over again, it's legion that they will promise all sorts of taxes to local governments up front. They don't materialize. And I think we're going to have testimony about that, Mr. Chairman. So this has been, there's a long history of why this bill is here. It goes back to when I was chairing the Revenue Committee. Trying to remember, a couple of years ago, Mr. Chairman, and I brought a bill that allowed local assessors were very concerned about the assessment of these independent power producers. And they were wanting to share in the information, to understand the assessment process that the state of Wyoming was using. They were denied that, and we had a bill to give them more information. Of course, the industry opposed the bill. And then it came down to, we had a change in the leadership of the Department of Revenue, and the new director of the Department of Revenue read the law, read the statute, and opined that the Department of Revenue shouldn't have been assessing these facilities in the first place. You know, clearly they should be doing the utilities, but not the independent power facilities. Well, so that has led to a period of time when our assessors are gearing up to assess these projects, and they're doing it right now. They're well into this. Independent power producers are talking about, they have their own reasons. I believe one of them is they don't want to pay much taxes, to be honest. I'll be perfectly frank about that. But they also talk about consistency and things like that. And I assure you, our assessors can do this job. They're going to be very consistent. They'll do a great job. And the assessments will be good across the state. They have the people in all the counties to actually review this equipment, like they do oil refineries, processing plants, data centers. They're very good at taking a large industrial facility and discerning the taxes on that facility. The state of Wyoming is not. And so here we are. It's been in play. it's kind of wherever I go, it doesn't go. So I wasn't chairman of corporations, and corporations didn't want to bring it in revenue where it should have gone. You know, the proponents, I think it should have gone to revenue. So they brought it in corporations. They had a friendly audience. They had their votes counted. It came out of corporations. Well, now I'm the chairman of corporations. It's a corporation bill and you won't send it to me. So this is the way the games get played, and it's okay. I get it. But this is bad policy to approve this bill.
Questions from the committee for Senator? Hale,
Mr. Chairman,
please.
I think we have members in the audience who might help with this question, but I was a member of the Corporations Committee this summer and heard the testimony on this bill and the arguments both for and against. It was clear to me that both the local tax assessors are highly skilled and qualified to do this work, as is the state. But Senator Case, now the chairman of Senate Corporations, very good decision there, indicates that the state is not as competent or as equipped or qualified. If that is not correct, why? Or what is the basis for giving the deference to the county assessors?
Mr. Chairman, the counties have been following the new developed proposals extensively. The taxes have never measured up to the taxes promised. They want a chance to look at this. I think that we can, we pay lower property taxes in Wyoming than these companies do in other states. Let's just start there. Originally in the Revenue Committee, we had an expert from Kansas come and talk to the committee. Also suggested that for some reason, Wyoming's property taxes on industrial independent power producing facilities was lower than in other states. And then it comes down, you know, I know the Department of Revenue believes sincerely that they can do this. I know the Department of Revenue is competently managed. But I point out that in the time that the Department of Revenue has done this, the only appeal that's been had for all of this massive development has been with respect to Duke Energy, and it was totally trivial. The appeal issues were settled, and they were things like, oh, we counted too many wind farms, or we counted wind projects that were laying down. It was just a trivial numbers accounting thing. It wasn't on the basis of the assessment. 23 assessors have already hired consultants to do this work. They're ready to do this work. It's the exact same testimony that we had today about the bill regarding personal property. These are mostly personal property. And it's the exact same procedures, which our county assessors do very well. They're ready to do it. They spent the money. I think we should let them do it. They're right in their backyard. Experts in all these places. The state has a limited budget, limited staff, and they do it all from Cheyenne.
Senator Case, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to make you say it more clearly, that the Department of Revenue has not had a meaningful or a substantive appeal regarding their tax assessments. What should we be inferring from that, Senator Case?
Mr. Chairman, I think a good, healthy tax system, we appeal. We push back and forth. We find it. I think that's healthy. Nothing wrong with that. That is a healthy process of determining taxes. But I also appeal to the good senator from Laramie County, Mr. Chairman, that these are not like a utility. They don't serve multiple counties. There isn't a common investment that needs to be divided within the state of Wyoming and between counties. These serve particular individual counties, just like every other piece of, that's where they exist. They don't technically serve them. But think about it. Think about the principle. If this could be done at the state level, then why not do all oil and gas at the state level? Why not? Why have all this people in the assessor's office to go look at the drilling rigs and the factory equipment? And why not just do all the property at the state level? Because the counties do this with 100 different types of property that is the exact same type. Industrial property. They're very good at it. And you should let them do what they're good at.
Mr. Chairman. Just to help you hear some of the debate we had on the committee, one of the compelling reasons for why I was an aye vote on the bill in committee to bring it out was members of the public who came to testify against the bill or against the effort. And it was clear to me that much of this issue now has become politicized and that there is anger from constituents and anger from certain areas of the state, both as it regards to the tax assessment based on promises offered based on potential revenue that counties could gain and then they haven't been fulfilled, as well as the types of projects underway. And people wanting to stop those projects or make it harder for those projects, such as wind projects. And county assessors are elected. And knowing that they no doubt are feeling the political pressure associated with those concerns may have an influence over this outcome. And so from my perspective, it was clear to me that both the county assessors, as they have proven, are highly qualified and competent to come up with a fair and equitable tax assessment, as is the state. And so 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in expertise. But who was really feeling that pressure of political efforts that may end up not having that equitable result? And so for me, it was easier in order to move beyond some of those political concerns and focus more back on the work of the day, which is providing fair and equitable tax assessments. Mr. Chairman, that's my rationale. So curious to hear the senator's response.
Senator?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would completely disagree. I really would. I mean, honestly, is the rationale for state assessment going to be from now on that there's county opposition to development? Because there's county opposition to every kind of development, and there's county support for every kind of development. And that's why we have an assessor who's independent from the county commissioners, and they're elected to take the heat and go forward. I haven't heard the head of the Assessors Association, who I'm sure is going to testify, will testify that she doesn't know how this is going to come out, but she has an inkling because of some things. She will not say whether industrial scale wind development is good for Wyoming or bad for Wyoming, or whether we're getting enough taxes or not. They're not taking a position in that area. If we accept the senator's argument, then every time there's controversy about a development, we'll bump it up to the Department of Revenue to do the type of assessment that is locally done by our assessors now because of political controversy. And I just push back. That is not happening. That's not the basis of it. These people, our county assessors, Mr. Chairman, assess all the other types of industrial equipment, all the other types. The ones they don't assess are exceptions laid out in the law. Most importantly is utilities, because of the unitary valuation method that we use. And that makes sense. Utilities serve a multitude of counties, sometimes the whole state. This doesn't make sense. This is the politics of it. This is the politics of it. And you're gonna see it in spades. Move it to the state for the political reasons.
Members of the committee, anything further from you folks? Senator Case, so, and I have IFC, or is it independent power facility, right?
Yes, sir.
By that, it's a windmill. I guess it's windmills exclusively is what we're talking about. Solar farms too.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What could be other things? I mean, we're moving into a whole new world where power may be produced not by the utility, and the utility may have a contractual arrangement to buy the power, or the power may be end up being purchased and produced for consumers in a different way. But this is not utility generated power. And I think we're going to see in the future where we could have thermal plants. That's a coal or gas plant that's an independent power producer. And, certainly the utility, the big utility in the state that's talking about developing the nuclear power plant, that won't be owned by the utility. That'll be So we are talking right now, wind farms, which are growing rapidly in Wyoming. They have been waiting for the transmission connections to be able to further their plans. They're coming to fruition. So we're seeing rapid development. Now we're seeing a lot of solar projects. And those are probably going to be the leading contenders, but there's things like pump storage projects. That's where they pump water up and let it back down, that may be independent power producers, not done by the utility. In fact, the utilities are kind of backing off of being the new sources of generation.
So an independent facility generates power. They don't build their own transmission lines. Somehow they have to arrange to upload it into the grid. Is there a wheeling tariff or some kind of arrangement with the utilities, or does that have to be worked out facility by facility?
Mr. Chairman, we're kind of unique in Wyoming in that we do not have like a person that actually runs our grid. We don't have an independent system operator or a regional transmission authority. So it really is either, oftentimes it's with a contract with the utility. That's frequent. There is a law, it goes back to 1978, and it was called the Public Utility Regulatory Something Act. And it requires utilities to purchase the production of renewable independent power producers. Some of these facilities would be on a so-called PURPA projects where they wouldn't necessarily have a contract. They just show up and deliver the power.
All right. And then I'm not seeing any language struck in this bill. So it looks like it's all new language. How did this ever end up in the Department of Revenue in the first place? Do we know?
Mr. Chairman, I think the early days of these were a rarity. You know, they were kind of ancillary to the electric utility function. And so it was just presumed, I think, that it should be part of an electric utility plant. People didn't understand the difference, but there's a huge difference. Yeah, and then it became more important, and we started asking questions about, when you read the statute literally, it says property of electric utilities. And, you know, I think for 20 years or 10 years, we've thought that's part of an electric utility because it makes electricity, but it's not true. So finally it came to a head, but it took about 4 or 5 years to come to a head. It was only with this new director that they decided they agreed with me about the statute and they didn't have the authority.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, we listed wind, solar, hydrogen, and other. Would nuclear fit under this also if they're an independent power producer?
Mr. Chairman, it certainly could. Yeah, I think virtually any type of production of electricity could be performed either by the utility or independently. And in those cases where it's independent, we don't have the unitary basis for valuation that information available for utilities only.
Follow up, Senator Anderson? Okay, anything else from the committee? Before I go to agency comment, anything else, Senator Case, before we go to agency?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got to talk to the Black Hills Power Company executive, so I'll yield to you. Thank you, sir.
Good luck.
Yeah, they're going to eat my lunch.
Okay, agency comment?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. With me, I have Brian Judkins, who is the Property Tax Division Administrator. I believe Senator Case covered the history fairly well. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about House Bill 3. Yes, during the interim of 2021 was when this was being discussed during the Revenue Committee meetings. And it was at that time that I stated that I did not believe that Title 39 provided the Department of Revenue with the authority to value independent power producers. And that was based on my research in that independent power producers are not rate regulated. They simply sell power to public utility companies. And so it was discussed during last legislative session. There was a bill that substantially looked like this year's bill, and that bill failed. We took that at the Department of Revenue as an indication that the legislature did not want the Department of Revenue to value wind farms, solar farms, independent power producers. And we started down the path of providing local county assessors, of which there are 8 counties that have independent power producers currently, providing them with information so that they could take on that responsibility for 2023. Because of the timing of the session, we had agreed that we would go ahead and value those for 2022. And everyone was fine with that. So it's 2023 is the first year that local county assessors would have the responsibility of valuing independent power producers. Talk about the history just a little bit more. We first started seeing wind turbines, wind farms in Wyoming in that 98, 99 timeframe. Truly, it was determined by the Department of Revenue at that time that those were public utilities. And they just started valuing the wind farms. And we've done so up until this point. It should be noted, however, that if a wind farm is owned by a public utility, a rate-regulated public utility will continue to value those wind farms, even with this legislation passes. It is only those independent power producers that are not selling to consumers. They're basically the wholesalers that would be impacted by this law. The other part of this law, Senator Case talked about the confidentiality part. So in current law, with anything that is taxpayer provided information, annual reports, income information, and this is both for department assessed properties as well as locally assessed properties, that information is confidential. And we cannot disclose that further unless there are specific situations. Under current law, taxpayer provided information can be provided to county assessors and to local county commissioners once they state the reason for the request. And we've had that happen historically. What cannot be disclosed is our appraisals. So we go through and we appraise those properties. We do income approach to value, cost approach to value, whatever is the most applicable appraisal theory, just appraisal basics, 3 approaches to value, comparable sales income approach, and cost approach. And then we value those properties, and it's that appraisal that we could not share. If this bill passes and the county assessors, if this bill fails, we still have that piece of legislation that would allow us to give them the appraisals if the department's valuing them. So I think that that's an important piece in this, although it is only applicable to independent power producers. We still wouldn't be able to share that information for the list of other properties that we value. And I didn't know if that was of importance to the committee. I can tell you there's about 10 different types of properties that we value at the Department of Revenue using the same methodologies that we use for independent power producers and public utilities. With that, Mr. Chairman, that is basically what brought us here today. Obviously, the Department of Revenue, if it's the will of the legislature that we value independent power producers, we will. If it's the will of the legislatures for the assessors to do so, we'll certainly work cooperatively with them to ensure that they have any information that we could share with them for future.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jenkins, anything? Okay, committee, questions for the agency? Senator Guru.
Director. Hi. You said that you are going to continue to do wind farms that are run by large utilities. Could you give me a ballpark number of how many that is?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Senator Guru, I believe we only have one public utility company that has acquired wind farm projects, and it is included in their value.
Thank you.
Please, follow on. Okay. I have a question, and perhaps it might be better for the assessors, but you work very closely with them. there was discussion from Senator Case about a concern about they'd be inconsistent between counties. But they're, with respect to other kinds of property, how does either department assure that the assessors are consistent, or do the assessors assure that they're consistent? Are there mechanisms in place for that?
Mr. Chairman, so again, appraisal theory is the same whether it's local assessed or assessed by the department. And it's my understanding, and the assessors will testify to it, that they've hired an independent outside appraisal firm. All 8 counties that have these types of properties have hired the same firm. So I don't have any concerns related to whether the department values it or local assessors value it. I believe the same appraisal theory will be utilized. It's just a matter of, I guess, if you don't mind, I'd want to cover just a little bit about appealing. So yes, county assessors would have that ability for the property owners to appeal their value at local assessed, but they have the possibility that they can appeal our value as well. But I will tell you, in both instances, typically what happens is there's a work meeting, whether it's locally assessed or department assessed, and you try and identify and communicate any questions, any issues way before, and the goal is to not end up litigating this in the courts. And certainly we do the same process with railroads, utility companies, rail car companies, telecommunication companies, these large companies. So I would just like to state that whether you have a slew of appeals or you have 0 appeals, I believe is not indicative of the quality of those appraisals.
Okay, so my question, setting aside this situation where they've all hired a consultant, I take an oil and gas rig would be business, personal property that the assessor would. What is in place to make sure that the assessor in this county doesn't assess it at twice the value of the same piece of equipment as the assessor in another county? Is there some mechanism amongst the assessors or the oversight from the department to bring some consistency to that?
Mr. Chairman, we do publish a personal property manual annually, and it's a book about this thick that talks about appraisal methodology. And the other piece of that is we have a computer-assisted mass appraisal system that is table-driven, that does the calculations on personal property. I would not anticipate that the independent power producers are going to be valued in that manner, like we see with oil and gas field equipment. It just depends on the information that you've got. If you've got income information, you can apply a cap rate and arrive at income approach to value. If you only have cost information, historical cost information, you may be using a cost approach to value where you would trend that historical dollar value to a today's dollar value and then depreciate based on the life expectancy of the equipment. Those methodologies are uniform across the board.
Okay.
The only place where you're going to have appraisal judgment come in is obsolescence. And that's in the form of economic obsolescence, possibly if, for example, if I'm an independent power producer and you're using an income approach to value, the reason people buy commercial industrial property is to get a return on their investment. And if I don't have an independent, a purchase power agreement, that particular property may not be as valuable on the open market as a company that does have a purchase power agreement because of that income stream. Those are all things that local county assessors and the Department of Revenue have to analyze on an annual basis when we arrive at value. So those are the items that typically have the largest amount of discussion in those work meetings.
Anything else for the agency before I go on, move on to the next? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Greatly
you, Mr.
appreciate it.
Chairman.
Is there any other agency comment, or you're the only agency, Brenda? You're the only one. Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. And I think we have some people online for comment on this as well, don't we, Linda? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee, my name is Gunnar Malm. I'm a Laramie County Commissioner here in support of this bill. There's been some discussion about the lack of appeals that have happened at the state level. And I'll tell you, that if this is to go to the local level, we'll certainly probably see appeals. And that's kind of where my issue lies, is running the clock forward to my role as a commissioner in this whole process. And that's to sit as the Board of Equalization. And it's an interesting position. Spend a lot of time with Mr. Eggers back here in the spring for another locally assessed refinery. But it's not a position that I believe, and this is going to get me in a lot of trouble, and you'll like this, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe commissioners are super qualified to sit as a Board of Equalization in these matters, because these are complex properties. And my background is commercial real estate, and I actually find it very difficult to sit in this role and make these judgments. So what will happen is we have these local assessments, they'll be appealed, we'll make a decision that will ultimately be appealed, and we're just adding costs to the county. These hearings are expensive. We have a hearing officer, we have other costs that we incur, and it slowly racks up the bill at a local level. It's been testified to by the Director of Revenue that they're going to use the same method. T.Y. Pickett, who we hire, is going to use the same method that the Department of Revenue uses. So I don't know why we're expecting a different result having it at the local level this year. I will say that the bill as it stands, we will have an assessment this year done locally, and then it will revert to the state, and we can see if there's a major difference. But going forward, I believe that this should stay at the state level. And I know it's outside the scope of this bill, but I'd be happy to have a discussion about what property types are locally and state assessed into the future, just because I think that there is kind of a discrepancy. We have all entered into the same agreement with the same firm to do these. I believe it is important to have a background and understand those different approaches to value. And that's where we have this conflict of revenues and projections. When you're using a cost approach, like was mentioned, if you're not selling the power, you're not reaping the revenues to increase the taxable value. And so I believe a lot of this can be sorted out with further discussions. And I fully believe our assessors are qualified to do it. I don't want, I have a great assessor here in Laramie County. He's more than qualified. I believe T.Y. Pickett's qualified. The assessors across the state are. It's that next step that I worry about. And I think that I know my limitations. And I think that's the best part somebody in government can have, is knowing their limitations. I'm not a judge. I'm not a doctor. I am not an appraiser. And so to sit in that role is very difficult. And I think it's unfair to not only the assessors, but it's unfair to the taxpayers. And so I would, again, say that I'm in full support of the bill and happy to answer any questions.
Questions? So on that basis, it would seem to me that all industrial business property should go to the state if you don't feel that you're qualified to make those kind of judgments as a Board of Equalization at the county level.
Gunnar Malm, the Laramie County Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, would say yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else, committee? All right. Thank you, sir. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome. You came ready. The big 3-ring binders.
Mr. Chairman, Dixie Huxtable, Converse County Assessor, and here represent
Say again the name.
Dixie Huxtable, Converse
Okay.
County Assessor. And I'm going to scoot this just back a little bit because my voice is naturally a little bit loud. The Assessors Association did take a stand on this bill. They do support this bill. All 23 counties did support the bill. The director is correct. There's only 8 counties currently that have independent power producers operating in their county. All 8 of those unanimously voted to go to a third-party consultant this year to help with the valuation, to ensure that there was consistency across the county lines. The majority of these facilities are located within one county, very similar to the coal mines, the gas plants, the refinery, the other industrial property you've heard talk about that we also hire a third-party consultant to help us with, who, by the way, look at the income, look at economic factors, service factors. We go to appeal with our County Board of Equalization. Sometimes they go higher. That's the same process for all of those industries that we currently do, would be similar to what we're talking about for the independent power producers. We feel that
I'm
this
sorry
is,
to interrupt. Did you
Yes.
say all 23 support the bill?
all 23 counties supported the bill.
Okay.
When we
which
had our-
means
when
it's gonna stay at the state.
Correct.
Okay.
No, supported the bill. I'm sorry, I said that just backwards. Thank you very much for correcting me. I got way ahead of myself. All 23 counties did a no support of the bill.
Okay, I
So
gotta
they
check.
wanted to stay with the counties. I apologize. Let's make sure we get, you're absolutely correct. We voted for a no support.
Okay. That
But
would
it
be-
was
that would
unanimous.
be
I'm sorry.
opposed. I wrote oppose.
Opposed. I'm sorry. That is, I apologize. I want to get back on the record before my assessors meet me at the door as I go out. We did take a no support on this bill. What we did support unanimously, all 23 supported hiring a consultant to do this, and all 8 of them that were involved did. I apologize. That is absolutely, I stated wrong correctly the first time. The reason that we got involved in this, I want to go back a little bit to that history of how this started. Some of the questions were, are they paying their fair share of taxes? My answer is they're paying what we assess them. We don't know how that appraisal was calculated. I have requested that information that Director Henson talked about for many years for the independent power producers in my county. I have looked at those annual reports. I cannot get to the same appraisal value that the department did. I do not have access to their appraisal as the statutes don't allow that. It's confidential. It should stay with the department as it has been in the past. But when I was asked how it was valued, I could not answer that question. So I took it upon myself in my county, and I'm going to speak just for my county right now. I went out to industrial siting permits. I went to public documents that these industries had published and came to our communities when they were bringing these facilities in. And this is what they said they would be bringing in a project value and in tax dollars. So I went and looked at those. That's public information. Then I went and looked at what they're actually paying. It didn't coincide. The values did not match up and the taxes did not match up. I understand that the permits are an estimate. I absolutely understand that. But when it comes in at 40 to 50% of what they're estimating over a period of time, I have a concern. So we took a look at these facilities and we said, what makes them different than the refineries and the other industrial equipment we have? And we felt like there was no difference. And I want to be clear, the Department of Revenue is valuing, and I have no question that they're doing the job the way that they feel they should. And I want you to remember, they're valuing those regulated companies and these independent power producers as a company. So the major regulated companies are valued as a whole. They are taking that value and allocating it to the assets that are in each jurisdiction. They're not valuing that wind farm per se. I have one of those in my county that's owned by a public regulated company. The department does not give me a value for that wind farm. They give me a value for that tax district that includes everything that that company owns in that tax district. The independent power producer is a wholly owned subsidiary in my county of a major taxpayer, of a major company. That major company's books are not being looked at. They are not involved in the valuation of that private company. That wholly owned subsidiary has its own set of books. It's its own entity, and that is what's valuing that wind farm. So when they're valuing them the same, yes, they're looking at the books, but there is a vast difference in our opinion, and specifically my opinion in Converse County. Those wholly owned subsidiaries, those books are just that one isolated thing in my boundary. The regulated company includes value all over the country, including Wyoming in my jurisdiction. So we feel like there was a big difference. And we felt like that based on the fact that they were in our county, we do complex industrial facilities already, some in-house, honestly, most of them with the help of a third-party consultant that looks at all of the things that the department looks at, the revenue streams, the cost tables, the depreciation, the historical cost, all those things. And the fact that the values that have been coming out, including the taxes paid, have not matched up with the company themselves said they anticipated paying. We felt they should stay locally. And my question was, is the values that the company telling us when they put those projects out to bid or come into my community? I have one coming shortly. They've put a public notice. Are those numbers that they're sharing with my constituents real, honest, supportive? Or is the department's value the correct value? Which one is it? Because they're not the same. And the reason I thought that they'd be appropriating the local is because I'll have that answer. The confidentiality will still be in place. I will not be able to share that with the company for 2023 with anybody but the company. But at least I will have the firsthand knowledge. My staff has been out there every year to look at those facilities. Department has not. They have scheduled field inspections. For various reasons, they've not been able to be there. My staff will be there. We've already done the inspections. So for those reasons, we feel that it's appropriate that the independent power producers stay at the local level where they will be for 2023. And we ask for a no vote on this bill. Be very clear, no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Give me your last name. I caught Dixie.
Huxtable, Huxtable.
Okay, Huxtable. Thank you. Questions from the
Chairman?
committee, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you. Assessor Huxtable, thank you for being here and your expertise, which has been very helpful. I remember discussing in the interim the confidentiality provision, and I was proposing in the interim an ability for county assessors under the auspice of confidentiality still to evaluate that appraisal by the state. It was my understanding that that didn't move forward because I believe the state had agreed to do that per rule or some other type of solution. Can you help jog my memory about how you were going to approach the ability to allow county assessors to look at those state appraisals that do have confidential and proprietary information in them and maintain that protection, but give the county assessor some level of confidence in the work of the state?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, we did have some discussion about the confidentiality and the appraisal side of it. There's two separate, very separate pieces to this. One is the annual report that the companies provide to the department. That currently in statute, we have the ability to ask for it in writing, and given good cause, the department will share that annual report. And there was a time when that was not happening, but it is happening now. And so that is not an issue. The appraisal, there's some confidentiality issues, both within the statutes and within the appraisal world, that an appraisal is for a specific purpose, and whether or not the department has the ability ethically and or legally to share that appraisal and discuss it with us. So this bill offers some language that says that upon written request, they would provide their appraisal for us for review. The question I have, does that include us being able to discuss the value and how it was arrived at? Only the Director of Revenue could probably answer that question clearly. I'm not sure what the legal term for review is, but that was kind of the issue with the confidentiality of the actual appraisal work. There are many things that go into the appraisal. There's appraisal judgment, and that's from everything to your house to these industrial facilities. And that is confidential under the guise of that is the appraisal work of that appraiser, which is currently at the Department of Revenue.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Assessor Huxtable, for pointing out that kind of solution identified in the bill draft based on the work from the interim. But isn't it fair to say that in light of this bill draft and in light of the practice of the department now, if you had those same concerns today that you had experienced before, that you could have that appraisal done? I know that's a big deal, but the county could at its own expense hire that third-party consultant that you currently do and compare information. If you truly felt that the state was undervaluing by 40 to 50% the estimated tax assessment, because that's the assertion, is that the state got it wrong by about 40 to 50% based on the information available to you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I believe we probably could do that. We could hire someone to do an independent appraisal for our county. The issue is this bill, current language and this bill does not give the county the authority to appeal that value. And depending on the definition and how that is interpreted, would we have the ability to discuss that value with them as far as any changes that we felt or inaccuracies that were in it? I don't believe the department would believe that. I believe that what they understand with this, and certainly Director Henson can testify to that, is that they are going to let us see the appraisal. And what we can do with it from that point on is limited. We do not have the ability, our commissioners do not have the ability to appeal a state assessed value. That's between the company and the state.
Mr. Chairman, in the committee, I did ask about county's abilities to intervene, per se, which caused great panic amongst the interested parties in the room. I don't think it's appropriate right now for this bill draft or this session to go down that pathway. But I don't know that it is an improper topic for the Corporations Committee or the Revenue Committee, probably the Corporations Committee, to consider moving forward, because the county assessor's concerns are warranted, that if the state's assessments are woefully off for whatever reason, that they have the ability to step in and capture those revenues or correct the problem on behalf of their constituents. An important tool, I think, that I do believe the counties would exercise carefully. However, that said, I don't think that's before us today in a much larger conversation, and not something I intend to do for everyone whose heartbeats are going a little faster. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further from the members of the committee? Anything further? I'd like to circle back to where you said the values don't match the representations that were contemporary with the projects coming in. I'd be curious to see what those are and how you conclude 40 to 50. We don't need to do it now. I just like a copy. Because I was on revenue when there was proposed the wind tax. And I was given tables that show here's all the taxes these projects will pay. And it was a big number. And partially on that basis, I voted against the wind tax because I looked to me like they're paying God's plenty of taxes. So I'd like to see what you're looking at for representations and how you conclude that it's 40 or 50% less than what was represented. I mean, that's very concerning to me because I had tables that I don't know if they're the same tables you looked at, but they were pretty impressive in terms of what these projects were supposed to pay.
Mr. Chairman, and I can certainly get you that information. I do have it for Converse County in a chart of what they've actually paid, what they estimated that they would pay, and the difference. I think there is also a facility in southwest part of the state. The Sweetwater County may have some of that information as well on a not a wind farm, but it's a solar farm that has that similar kind of information. We can certainly get that to you. And I'm not saying they're not paying a lot of taxes. That's not, please be careful. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when they put out a public permit that says, we anticipate that we will bring in ad valorem taxes. And I was very specific when I went and looked at those public permits, that I wasn't commingling sales tax, excise tax, generation tax. I was looking for just ad valorem if I could identify it. And then went and looked at what actual taxes were being paid for that time span that they represented. And it wasn't close. The one example, and I can get you the details, but they were estimating a little over 13 million in a 5-year span, and it turned out to be 9. Just a little under 9 million. So that is what brought me to this table to look at this, not because I think the department is doing anything wrong. I just need answers. I need to understand. And fundamentally, I, as the local assessor, can do this. I want you to understand that I feel like we are capable, and this is in our backyard. This is something that we are capable of doing just like we do other industrial facilities. And so it's not that I'm saying the department is wrong. I'm saying there's an inequity here. Let's figure it out. And I'm capable of doing it. And it is a tax policy. And we certainly understand that as assessors. This is a tax policy. We will administer whatever the legislature wants to be. We just want to be on notice that we're capable of doing this. And we feel that this is the appropriate place for it.
Thank you. Anything further, committee? All right. Well, thank you, Assessor Huxtable. Further public comment?
Chairman Kinsky, you do have someone online?
Okay, we've got 2 folks coming to the desk, and then we'll go to online.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mary Ann Shaner here on behalf of NextEra Energy Resources, and I would like to introduce Erica Kinney.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak in strong support of HB3 today. My name is Erica Kinney. I am a Senior Director of Tax Policy with NextEra Energy Resources. NextEra is the world's largest wind and solar company, and we develop 758 megawatts of wind in Laramie and Converse counties. These projects represent over $1 billion of capital investment in Wyoming. Further, NextEra will bring online 556 megawatts of new wind by the end of 2024, an additional $1 billion of investment to the state. NextEra was the 6th largest non-minerals property taxpayer in the state in 2022 and 2021. Over the expected 30-year lives of NextEra's currently operating assets in Wyoming, NextEra will pay approximately $255 million in landowner payments and will generate hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. We hope to execute on an additional $3 billion of wind and solar projects in Wyoming beyond 2024. Maintaining a stable tax structure in Wyoming is critical to achieving this goal. The industry's support of HB3 stems from the desire to avoid moving from a uniform and consistent approach by the department, dealing with a single taxing authority, to multiple county assessors with potentially different approaches, and the potential for unreputable third parties to insert themselves in the process. We have heard that the department's valuations must be too low because there's been no litigation or appeals. That claim is inaccurate. In the mid-2000s, my company appealed Department of Revenue valuations for several years and filed litigation in 1 year. The litigation was settled out of court when the parties reached a fair compromise on the method being used in an effort to avoid costly litigation in that year and in the future. The fact that there has been no recent litigation actually indicates that valuations have been fair and uniform because prior litigation helped establish a mutually acceptable and legally viable assessment framework for Wyoming. The department undertakes a proactive and robust approach to its valuation of properties, annually meeting with industry representatives to develop certain assumptions, including capitalization rates for each industry that is state assessed. This is a major driver in determining the value of an income-producing property. Once established, those rates are applied uniformly across each industry. This approach has served to avoid costly property tax appeals and litigation at the state level. No such process or uniformity exists at the local level. Each county assessor or third-party appraiser will develop a cap rate for each individual property, likely to result in disparate treatment of wind and solar projects across the state, potentially leading to expensive and lengthy appeals. It is rare in our experience that challenges to state valuations occur. Valuation protests arise for many legitimate reasons, but in our experience, protests and appeals typically involve local valuations done by third-party appraisers. Our industry has supported language that would provide assessors access to the information that they currently do not have in order to address their initial concerns. So far, that solution has been rejected. For these reasons, we ask this committee to support HB3 to clarify the statute, maintain the status quo, and ensure that all wind and solar facilities are treated the same. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Committee questions? Questions? All right, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, we've got somebody online and then we'll go back to any other members of the public we have here. On, Jim Wilcox, good to see you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to testify remotely. I've appeared before you in person many times, but schedules and roads don't allow for it today. Do want to go on the record on behalf of Converse County as one of the largest, if not the largest wind generator in Wyoming at the moment, that we are pro-wind, pro all of the above energy portfolio that has been talked about by the governor and members of the legislature. But we are opposed to this bill for the reasons that you've heard from our assessor and others. Locally assessed property for independent power producers is the correct place for it. If you look at 3913-102, the list of what is state assessed, you have to use a shoehorn to push independent power producers into that list. Because if you look at mines and pipelines and utilities and railroad companies and the others that are state assessed, they clearly cross boundaries, are clearly multiple state and multiple county entities. Independent power producers exist as a subsidiary in one location. We have one north of Douglas that was built in one construction period, but is 3 separate projects. 2 of them independent power producers and 1 operated by a utility. And so the independent power producer does not meet the other definitions that you see under Chapter M of 3913-102. And again, we would have to shoehorn it in there. Senator Grew, you had asked a question earlier about utilities. The 2 that I am aware of are in Commerce County. Rocky Mountain Power built the very first wind farm in Commerce County, and it is assessed as a utility, part of their multi-state assessment. And the one of them north of Douglas just recently completed will be that way. And I think former Representative Madden would even struggle to understand the methodology used on the unitary system for multi-state projects like that. But I want to also say, as ProWind, and you just heard from NextEra, they have been great partners in our county, and we appreciate their investment in our county and in Wyoming. But I still believe that the local assessment is the best policy and the best procedure to make sure that we do it right. As you heard from Huxtable, from Assessor Huxtable, being in the field and seeing those on a regular basis is important. The training and education for the Department of Revenue is similar, if not the same, to what our local assessors do. So the education and the capability to do this is clearly at the local level. And this isn't about capability, it's about appropriateness. And the appropriateness belongs at the local level. You heard about the differences between what has been publicly stated and what's publicly paid. And I fully agree that the independent power producers are paying what they are taxed. I hope in this year that we are doing it with local, and in the future, we will find that our numbers are correct and they are close. But as Huxtable said, we don't understand because the state assessed system leaves commissioners and assessors in the dark about the final methodology. And finally, I would just note that our assessor just got resworn in, and she swore without fear or favor to assess property in our county. And I believe she is very capable of that, as are the other 8 assessors that have wind in their communities. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity. I urge you to vote no on this bill and let local assessment continue for independent power producers. And I would be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Jim. I'm going to go to the committee. Clearly, we're going to have to hold this over. And don't we have to be down on the floor at 1:15? 1:40. Oh, good. Okay. Questions for Commissioner Wilcox? Questions for Commissioner Wilcox? I've got one. Were you speaking on behalf of the County Commissioners Association or just Converse County?
Mr. Chairman, clearly just for Converse County, my good friend Commissioner Malm is on the other side of this issue, but Converse County stands strongly opposed. And as a board, we are unanimous in that position.
All right, thank you. Anything else for the commissioner? Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, public comment continued. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Brown representing Powering Up Wyoming. We are a grassroots organization that supports renewable energy alongside our legacy industries as part of Wyoming's all of the above energy strategy, and we stand in support of the bill. As I have spoken with industry, Mr. Chairman, consistency in appraisal is the #1 concern. The state has always appraised these properties, and until this year, this year would be the only year that changed and went back to the counties. I think it's important to note that not just independent power producers, but any industry would likely be concerned if the entity assessing their tax property each year suddenly shifted to an entity that said, we don't necessarily have the expertise. We need to hire an out-of-state third-party assessor or company to help us with our assessment. That's been a big concern with the industry. It's important to note also that even though the 7 counties that currently have these properties in their county have all uniformly hired the same private third party, there's nothing in statute that dictates that. There could be a future where there are 8 or 23 different private entities assessing these properties. Again, that's concerning. When I've spoken with industry, I've learned that model, local assessment with a private third-party entity, has resulted in the highest rates of appeal and getting hung up. And appeals are expensive for industry and they're expensive for the taxpayers. And so, Mr. Chairman, we stand fully in support of this bill. We want the assessment of independent power producers to stay at the state level, and we hope that you'll move this bill forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the executive director of Wyoming Taxpayers Association. Wyoming Taxpayers Association is a 501c4 think tank with the 501c3 research arm. Our mission is to advocate for sound tax policy for our healthy Wyoming economy. Positions that we take are based on an analysis of legislation against the cornerstones of taxation through our policy committee. Their recommendation is then forwarded on to our 20 board of directors for a decision. Based off that criteria, Mr. Chairman, WTA supports House Bill 3, State Assessment of Independent Power Producers, as it stands to be sound tax policy for the following reasons. It is justified as the tax statute clarification is needed to have the statute match longstanding practice of assessing all plants alike according to previous testimony from the Wyoming Department of Revenue. It is fiscally prudent for the state and for the counties to keep all power plants and electric infrastructure assessed by the same state entity. The Wyoming Department of Revenue already has the expertise, the data, the comparable property information, and the ability to continue to uniformly assess all electric properties every year. It is equitable as the state tax statute clarification will assure that all similarly situated taxpayers in the electric industry sector will all continue to be treated equally and uniformly in terms of property tax assessment and valuation. Additionally, this assures that the constitutional principles of just valuation and uniform assessment are met for the alike taxpayers in the electric sector. It is stable as the bill will maintain the current practice, avoiding potential volatility in property tax assessment that may result from lack of uniformity in assessments across jurisdictions, which also could create volatility in the allocation of wind generation tax revenue to the counties, which is based on relative property tax values. This tax statute clarification assures the continuation of stable, consistent, predictable property tax assessment and valuation treatment for all alike taxpayers. Finally, it is transparent as the tax statute clarification provides clarity and visibility to an existing practice. Wyoming Department of Revenue is ready and capable to continue the assessment of independent power producers just like they always have. Additionally, as previously stated, it's cost effective to collect as this does not require an additional contract, and the Wyoming Department of Revenue already has the expertise, the data, the comparable property information, and the ability to continue uniformly assessing all electric properties every year. Thank you.
Committee, questions for either of these two folks? No? All right. You did a wonderful job. No questions. Thank you both. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm the president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. I come to you today with maybe a little bit of a different spin on the conversation than what you've heard. And in the essence of time, I'll try to be brief. But, you know, in Wyoming, we pride ourselves on being business friendly. The companies that have come here have been operating under a certain set of rules and standards for many years. House Bill 3 is simply an effort to codify existing practice. So really what the dilemma is for the business community is we come here, we follow the rules, we pay our taxes. Businesses are more than happy to pay their taxes a fair amount. And the insinuation that someone's to game the system or, huge discrepancies, I just submit to you, it's simply false. Our businesses are good corporate citizens. They want to follow the rules in Wyoming, but they need to know what the rules are. And this is, by not having this consistency is very disruptive. And really what it's doing, Mr. Chairman, is putting the taxpayer in the middle, which is simply, in my mind, not good policy. The fact that the local assessor and the state assessor, if there's some disagreement about who should be doing what, ultimately the person that loses is the business that's trying to figure out who do we work with? What's the methodology used? How do we follow the rules? And to be that good corporate citizen that I know business in Wyoming strives to be. So, to come for our businesses to invest millions of dollars, think that they understand the rules of which they're operating and then switch midstream just doesn't feel maybe consistent with our code of the West. So for that reason, again, please don't put the taxpayer in the middle, simply codify what the existing practice is. And please support House Bill 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Travis McNiven here on behalf of NU Renewable Energy. Not to, I don't have a lot to add what has already been said here today, other than that as a small independent power producer, also stands in favor of House Bill 3 and moving it forward in committee today. Thank you.
Committee questions for either Cindy or Travis? Questions? No? All right, thank you. Further public comment? Further public comment? Anybody else online? All right, I'll close comment. It's to the committee. Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
No.
Senator Carew. Senator Nethercott. Senator Salzar. And Chairman Kinsky.
No. All right, that gets, that will be reported out to the floor, 3-2. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. The meeting is adjourned.